Mika the Star Child, 5/12/34.
I just saw something spectacular. A giant light fell from the sky. It caused a massive ball of white to burst over the horizon, like a large amount of dynamite just exploding. At first, I thought that the miners were doing some excavation work, but at this hour, logically, it made no sense at all. Nothing I've seen or read matches what I have witnessed. I wonder if anyone else has seen it. Surely they have. It was massive. It's definitely something out of the ordinary, that is for sure. I'm going to try and document this the best I can. Note to self, contact other astronomy experts or perhaps weather authorities. This needs to be understood. I'll continue to observe and record this event from my telescope. I'll be sure to keep my observations updated just in case something interesting happens.
Mika stirred, her body aching as though she'd been forged in fire and shattered on impact. She couldn't exactly remember the fall, not fully, but the sensation of motion and heat still trembled faintly beneath her skin. The ground beneath her was damp, and the air was heavy with silence, only broken by the rustle of leaves and the occasional chirp of a cricket. A bruised violet sky stretched overhead, dotted with fading stars. Her limbs refused to move at first, locked by a deep, unfamiliar pain. So she lay there, curled in the shallow crater of her own making, eyes open to a sky that called her name. She knew that up there was her home. Time passed in a quiet hush. Eventually the horizon grew pale, then gold. Light spilled through the tangled branches above, seeping into the forest like spilt ale. As the sun rose, the world breathed with it. The forest was unlike anything Mika had ever known. Moss climbed up the ancient oak trees like velvet, thick and lush, catching the light in emerald fragments. The air smelt of morning dew and something older, earthy, sweet and wild. Tiny birds flitted between branches, chirping in staccato bursts, as if gossiping about her sudden arrival. Mika slowly sat up, the pain dulled now to a quiet throb. Her fingers brushed the earth. It was soft, cool and real. She took a breath, then another, and then carefully she stood. The crater was shallow but wide, a scar in the forest floor, surrounded by splintered branches and disturbed leaves. As she climbed out, her gaze caught on something hanging low from a branch nearby. A scarf. It was draped delicately over the bark, as though there with purpose. Deep green with gold embroidery, patterned with curled vines and stars. It looked well-travelled but cared for. Mika reached for it instinctively, her fingers brushing the fabric. A marker? A trail sign. Whoever left it had been here not long ago. She wrapped it around her shoulders. It felt comforting and familiar, even if she had never seen the garment in her life. With the scarf snug around her shoulders, Mika took a step forward. The forest stirred in gentle rhythms. She didn't know where she was, only that staying felt wrong. Something in her chest pulled her forward, an invisible tether, soft but insistent. She moved quietly through the underbrush, weaving in between the gnarled trees and low-hanging branches that brushed against her shoulders like grabbing hands. The rising sun formed patches of gold on the ground in between the dark shadows. Further on, Mika noticed a thin trail of smoke curling into the air. Her breath caught it. It rose gently, no rush of flames, no chaos, just the steady exhale of something living. Hope bloomed cautiously in her chest. Mika followed the smoke, winding her way through the tangled forest until the ground beneath her feet began to shift. The moss gave way to trampled grass, and soon after she stumbled across the hard-packed dirt of a road long forgotten. The trees leaned in closer and the light dimmed again, not with night, but with age. This path had seen better days. Mika noticed something in the distance. Wagons, half sunken into the earth, their wheels cracked and broken. One was overturned, its contents spilled across the road. Splintered crates, shattered glass and dried-up herbs were strewn everywhere. Another stood upright but empty, its canvas roof torn and flapping lazily in the gentle breeze. Mika slowed, her steps quiet now. A box lay half open beside a tree, filled with colourful cloth and trinkets as if belonging to a circus, now left to the mercy of the elements. The forest had already begun reclaiming the scene. Ivy curled around the axles and moss crept into the corner of the crates. But there was no sign of people. No blood, no bodies, just absence. She knelt beside the wooden crate and ran her fingers along the small grooves where a name had once been etched, now worn almost completely away. The silence here was different, thicker, a stillness that felt like peace and more waiting. Mika stood and looked ahead. The smoke was closer now, visible beyond a bend in the path. She began walking again, slower this time, eyes darting to every shadow. Whatever happened here, it wasn't forgotten. It had been purposefully left behind. Katz, the scribbler. Light pierced through the upper shutters of the observatory like a blade, slicing across the circular walls and directly into Katz's eyes. He groaned, dragging the pillow over his face, as if it would protect him from the inevitable crawl of daytime. But the ache in his head made ignoring the world impossible. With a grunt, he swung his legs over the edge of his narrow bed, blankets tangled around his ankles. His room was a cluttered sprawl of parchment, ink bottles, and faded constellations, drawn on hanging scraps of canvas. The observatory walls were built in a dome, crowned by the great brass telescope that emerged from the open slit in the ceiling, like a curious eye. He stumbled across the creaking wooden floor, one hand shielding his squinting eyes, and pulling the rope to close the upper shutters. With a soft metallic clunk, the light was sealed out. Darkness fell instantly, blanketing the room with a familiar gloom. He exhaled, relief, momentary as it was. Katz lit an oil lantern with a practiced flick. The low flame bloomed against the glass, casting flickering shadows across the domed ceiling, where stars had once been carefully painted in gleaming gold. Most of them were peeling now. The headache pulsed behind Katz's eyes. He gathered the papers strewn across the floor, charts, sketches, and unfinished letters, and tossed them onto the cluttered table at the room's center. One notebook lay open already. His eyes scanned the hastily scribbled words. 5/12/34.
I just saw something spectacular. A giant light fell from the sky.
He trailed a finger down the ink as if hoping the words would shift into answers. They didn't. Just a storm of wonder and confusion from the night before, now dulled by uncertainty. But maybe he had imagined it. No, the light. It was real. Katz set the book aside and reached for fresh parchment. Dipping his quill in ink, he began to write.
To the Honourable Astrologist, Aurelio the Grand, I seek your counsel regarding an extraordinary occurrence witnessed in the early hours of 5/12/34. A massive burst of white light, not matching any celestial patterns currently in record. This meteorological or celestial phenomenon appeared in the northwestern sky. I inquire if any of your own studies at Zybo's Perch recorded such a sight. Enclosed are preliminary sketches and possible coordinates from my observatory. Please advise. K, Junior Astrologist of Argolia.
He folded the letter with care and sealed it with wax. Katz sighed a long, slow breath that did nothing to lift the weight pressing down on his chest. After washing his white fur with cold basin water, he shrugged into his worn cloak, deep blue, covered in celestial patterns and patched at the sleeves. Katz stepped outside. The village street was quiet, save for the usual bustle of morning carts and chattering neighbours. Katz kept his head down. Eyes followed him. They always did. He was the odd one, the stargazer who lived alone with his paper planets, while everyone else lived with joy and whimsy. Children whispered. Adults avoided him unless they needed weather predictions. Katz didn't mind, though. Not really. He thought that the people were exhausting because of their false charade of happiness.
Frank!
Katz called, spotting a familiar shape at the end of the dock. The fisherman turned, pipe clenched between his teeth, eyes squinting beneath a battered hat.
Hey? Okay. Morning. You look worse than usual. You here to give me my morning weather?
Katz ignored the jab.
No, but did you see it? The light from last night, the blast over the horizon.
Frank shook his head slowly.
Didn't see nothing. Storm passing near the mountains, but no thunder, no sky fair. Maybe a dream, eh?
Katz frowned.
No, it wasn't.
Then got it be, lad, or something close to it. Either way, it wasn't fish, so I don't care.
Typical, thought Katz. Katz gave a tired nod and turned, letter still clutched in his hand. He made his way to the mailbox and slid the envelope into the rusty slit. He listened to the faint clunk as it landed inside. He turned around and then noticed something unusual. It was a girl. Unfamiliar. She looked lost, out of place. Her clothes were too fine, too strange for this humble village, and she walked like someone newly born into the world, tentative and unsure. Her eyes darted nervously from storefront to stranger. The scarf around her shoulders shimmered faintly in the morning light. Katz's heart skipped. No one else seemed to notice her, or maybe they did and chose not to. That was the way of this place. But to him, she was the only thing in focus. He glanced around. The villagers, Frank, the baker's boy, even old Ruby sweeping her doorstep. They would never entertain his questions. They thought him strange, a recluse playing with stardust. But she didn't know him. That was reason enough. He took a breath, steeled himself and approached.
Excuse me?
Katz said softly.
You're not from here, are you?
His eyes searched hers.
Did you see the light last night?
The girl hesitated, Her eyes flickered toward the sky, as if the answer still hung somewhere in the morning haze.
I think so.
She said softly, her voice like wind through tall grass.
It was bright. I don't know where I am.
Katz blinked. It wasn't the response of someone half interested in what he assumed to just be fireworks. That was something else. His mind flooded with questions, but before he could speak again, trumpets blared. Loud, artificial. The sound scraped against the morning air like a knife through silk. Everyone on the street froze. The girl flinched. Then came the dancers. From the main road, 2 figures burst into view, flipping and twirling with unnatural grace. Their movements were sharp, almost too sharp. Every gesture, a performance. Every step, calculated and aggressive in its cheer. It was the Queen's Guards, Vivian and Von Strada. They wore matching uniforms of crimson and midnight blue, swirling a contrast of jagged diamonds in silken ruffles. Silver bells jangled from their sleeves and ankles, but there was no joy in the sound, only thinly veiled dread. Each wore a porcelain mask over their face, smooth, white, doll-like with no features except for 2 tiny holes for eyes and a painted red smile that never wavered. They moved through the street like a fever dream, giggling and spinning, arms thrown wide as if in celebration of some unseen triumph. But it wasn't a celebration. It was surveillance. They weren't searching for smiles, they were hunting for frowns. Behind them, stomping through the street like a twisted puppet, came the clown. Massive, dressed in tattered yellow with faded smiley face buttons and long, striped pants that led down into tall, creaking stilts. His face was painted as well, his eyes hollow black pits, void of anything living. He didn't speak, he didn't dance, he just followed. Slow, relentless, like a nightmare in the morning light. The crowd did, as they always did, smiled and cheered. Tight, terrified grins spread across every face. Conversation stopped and backs straightened as people clapped along with the rhythm as Vivian and Von Strada twirled past, tossing glitter into the air like confetti at a funeral. Katz felt a chill run down his spine. He glanced at the girl. She wasn't smiling. Her face was pale, with a confused expression. He grabbed her wrist gently.
"Don't look at them," he whispered.
"Follow me quickly, before they see you."
Without another word, he led her through a narrow alley between 2 cottages, keeping low, weaving past rain barrels and laundry lines. They ran silently, the pounding of Katz's heart louder than his boots on the cobblestone. Behind him, the giggling continued, louder now, closer. They reached the edge of town. Katz's observatory rose like a forgotten tower, crooked and weather-stained, with its brass dome glinting dully in the morning light. He fumbled with the latch and threw the door open, ushering the girl inside before slamming it shut and drawing the deadbolt across. Darkness. Only the glim flicker of his lantern lit the room. Katz leaned against the door, breathing hard.
Them,
he panted, voice low.
The Queen's Guards. If they saw you frowning.
He paused.
Well, you don't want to find out.
He looked back at the girl again.
You're not from here, he said quietly, and now they might be looking for you.
Katz stumbled to the center of the room, still winded, and yanked on the rope to open the heavy shutters. Sunlight poured in, gold and clean, flooding the dark chamber and catching on specks of dust floating through the air. The curved walls were lined with paper, containing notes, diagrams, mathematical scrawlings, and sketches of imagined phenomena. The telescope protruded from the dome, still pointed toward the horizon, where Mika had fallen. It was cluttered, but this place felt more like a sanctuary than a home. Katz ran a hand through his fur and turned to Mika, who just stood beyond the stream of light.
Okay,
he breathed.
Let's just take a second. Are you all right? Sorry for dragging you like that. I've got to ask. What's your name?
The girl nodded slowly. Her gaze was distant.
Mika, and the light you saw.
She answered, voice soft.
It was me.
Katz scoffed.
You?
I fell.
She continued.
From up above, somewhere far, far away. I don't know how. Not fully, at least. But I remember the stars, and that I came here on accident.
Katz stared at her. Then he began to bounce. Not a little hop, but a full-bodied, barely contained springing. Katz stopped and tried to settle himself, although his excitement could not be hidden.
You?
He paused, pointing at her, then the sky. His brain couldn't keep up.
You're saying you're the light? The light? The thing that made that crater?
Mika gave a hesitant shrug.
Oh, great stars above!
Katz gasped.
Does that mean you're a literal celestial anomaly? This is the greatest moment of my life. This could be the breakthrough I've needed.
Katz paused. He turned around and picked up his journal and waved it dramatically.
I wrote about you. I thought I was finally losing it, but you're real.
Then Katz's giddy smile faltered into a stern gaze. He lowered the notebook.
But if you're not from here, and they find out...
His hand trembled slightly.
The Queen's guards, if they knew what you were, they'd...
Kat's rambling was cut short by a loud mechanical whirring, buzzing past the observatory. Katz and Mika looked upward towards the open shutters, just in time to see a massive armored ladybug streaking through the sky, scanning the rooftops below.
Oh, no.
Katz stepped backwards.
I think those are one of the Circus Kingdom scouts. They might already be looking for you.
He started pacing in quick, anxious circles.
We need to hide, Wait!
He leaped over to a nearby bookshelf and yanked out a faded red book with a tattered, cracked spine. Katz began flipping through pages.
I think maybe... Yes, here!
He pointed to a crudely drawn diagram of two smiling children vanishing into thin air.
This is a beginner Latonium spellbook,
he muttered.
It is literally meant for children, so the spells that can be casted are fairly weak. I used to study it as a hobby, nothing too in-depth, but regardless, it might be enough.
Mika tilted her head.
Enough for what?
Invisibility. 10 seconds, maybe 12. Just long enough for us to get on that bug if it lands and fly away.
Mika stared at him.
That's your plan?
He shrugged helplessly.
I never said it was a good plan.
They both waited, listening. The ladybug's wings clattered to a stop just outside the observatory door. A moment later, the soft clang of a pilot's boots hitting the cobblestone outside. Katz lit a small blue flame beneath the book's page, whispering an incantation that was written on it. Thin wisps of pale smoke curled upwards and spiraled around them. The air shimmered faintly. Mika felt the sensation of static in her fingertips, a gentle hum rushing beneath her skin. She was disappearing cell by cell.
On my mark,
Katz muttered, voice trembling. The observatory door creaked open on its rusted hinges. The pilot of the ladybug, dressed in a striped purple and gold flight leather, turned sharply, startled by the movement. The entrance appeared empty. He narrowed his eyes, his hand drifting to the baton at his hip. Leaves rustled, the wind stirred. Nothing. And then, all at once, everything. The spell hadn't quite finished when Katz and Mika slammed into him. They were barely visible in the sunlight, just flickers of outline and shadow. The pilot let out a sharp yelp, stumbling back, just as Katz yanked the reins of the aircraft. The giant ladybug hissed indignantly. Its mechanical wings buzzed to life, its jeweled shell flexed, with gears clicking beneath layers of plating. Mika gripped the sides of the harnesses, her eyes wide as they lifted into the air unevenly. The air hit them like a punch, cool, fast, and filled with the chaos of wings slicing the wind. Katz, hunched over the control levers, was struggling to steer.
Okay, the altitude is good. Stabilizing, I think.
The ladybug jolted sideways, and Katz let out a shriek.
I actually don't know if I can fly this thing.
Mika clung tighter, the wings clawing at her hair.
Where are we going?
There's a city in the sky,
yelled Katz over the roar of the wind.
Zybo's perch. It floats above the clouds. It's tethered by chains. You cannot miss it. I have a colleague, Professor Aurelio. If anyone can help you...
Katz didn't finish his sentence. Down below, amidst the stunned crowd, Vivian stood silently among the blur of panicked faces. Her head tilted into permanence. The bells on her hat jingled as she cartwheeled forward. The tall clown loomed beside her, and Von Strada. Without a word, Vivian scaled his stilts with the grace of a spider. Her red and blue jester's outfit shimmered, jingling softly as she rose. Reaching the shoulders of the clown, she stood effortlessly, arms poised outward, as though conducting the very air. She watched the ladybug intently. Then, with fluid, precise motion, she reached behind her and drew a gleaming spear from a slot in the clown's back. The weapon glinted, red streamers trailing from its base. With a dancer's grace and a soldier's strength, she hurled it towards Katz and Mika. The spear sang through the air. Katz barely had time to register the metallic screech as the spear tore through the left wing. The ladybug lurched, the gears grinding in protest, and its balance failed, tilting into a sharp spiral downwards.
Mika, hold on!
He shouted, gripping the reins with both hands. The insect twisted, its damaged wings sputtering. The rooftops blurred by in a haze of slate and smoke. A spire cracked against the side of the ladybug, sending shards of tile into the air. Mika shrieked as they clipped the top of an old clock tower. The trees rushed past, leaves slapped their faces. Branches clawed at the ladybug's shell. One snapped clean through the wing, sending the airborne vehicle into its final spin. The crash wasn't an explosion. It was an ugly, grinding tear, like the world itself was trying to swallow them. They slammed through the canopy and into the earth. Dirt and bark flying. The ladybug skidded along the forest floor, crunching over roots and scraping against stones before finally slamming into an ancient oak tree. Mika lay crumpled near the edge of the wreckage, gasping for air. Katz groaned somewhere behind her, tangled in a harness. The sunlight pierced the trees in scattered beams, illuminating the wreckage in its soft gold light. Splinters of bark and a trail of smoke marked the crater where the metal-bodied ladybug had landed. Its wings twitched once, then fell silent.
Mika!
Coughed Katz.
Mika, where are you?
I'm over here.
Mika's voice echoed through the trees.
I'm okay, I think.
She stumbled through a veil of leaves, pulling pine needles from her hair. Katz emerged from the underbrush. His glasses were crooked and his cloak was torn. When they both spotted each other, they both sighed in relief. The jester.
Thank the stars.
Katz muttered, brushing dirt from his fur.
That was probably the worst plan I've ever had.
Mika smirked.
You say that as if it didn't work.
Are you kidding? It barely worked.
They both looked back at the trail of debris, smoke still curling from the wreckage. If anyone had seen it go down, it wouldn't be long before the Queen's Guard came hunting.
We should probably get a move on.
Mika stated.
Just in case they're tracking us.
Oh, they certainly will be tracking us down, like a dog, I tell you,
muttered Katz, already limping forward.
The Circus Kingdom never lets anything go, especially not, outsiders.
They both ventured deeper into the forest, light filtering through the thick canopy in scattered ribbons. The air smelled of sap and damp moss. Branches and twigs cracked underfoot as they both trudged along the fading trail. While they were passing by a fallen tree, they heard a quiet shuffling sound. Katz approached the tree trunk. Then...
Surprise!
Katz squealed and flung himself backwards, landing flat on his back with a thud. Mika blinked, then snorted, then laughed. Hard. She doubled over, clutching her waist, wheezing between giggles. From the tree trunk leapt a figure, bouncing, skipping, and spinning.
I'm told it's quite rude to pop out and shout, but hiding's no fun, and that's what I'm all about.
Katz sat upright.
You scared the hell out of me. Who even are you anyways? What were you doing in there?
The figure stood tall, tall-ish, and struck a pose, 1 foot behind the other, arms splayed like a ringmaster mid-performance. They paused, tapping the side of their porcelain mask, which had somehow changed.
That's who I am. M is the name, say it if you can.
Mika, wiping tears from her eyes, said through chuckles.
Well, hi,
Katz narrowed his eyes. He wasn't amused.
Do you live in that tree?
No. Though it's cozy and hollow, a perfect escape from queens and clowns, from rules and red tape.
M twirled, then paused to gently pluck a leaf from Katz's shoulder.
I saw you two crash, with all that flair and all that brash. I simply had to see what caused it all in a flash.
Katz stood to his feet, alarmed.
You saw us crash?
Well, I heard the bug buzz, then boom! The ground shook. It sounded quite deadly, so I came to have a look.
M leaned in dramatically, peering at Mika.
And what did I find but a curious pair? A star child and a scribbler, gasping for air.
Mika's laughter faded, but her smile still remained.
You're not with the Circus Kingdom, are you?
M gave an exaggerated shudder.
Oh, those creeps with their absolute control. No, I left that foul role. I cartwheel and I skip and I wander the trees. I do as I wish and I do as I please.
M spun in a full circle and then froze. They lifted one leg, their arms bent like puppet strings.
I like you two. You're fun and you got flair. And any danger is always a breath of fresh air.
Katz whispered to Mika.
I think they're insane.
I think they're fun.
She whispered back, still grinning. M clapped their hands once.
So what's the plan, my brand new friends? Shall we walk into the forest ends? Or stay and dance until we drop? The woods are big, but the trees can talk.
Katz sighed, defeated.
Well, we do need to lay low, and at least they aren't trying to kill us.
M beamed, its mask grinning wider somehow.
That's the spirit, yes indeed. I know some people, I'll take the lead.
With a skip, M pranced ahead, vanishing behind a curtain of vines and singing something that only half rhymed. Katz and Mika looked at each other before following the jester. The trees eventually cleared, the sunlight gleaming into a clearing. Tent tops, once vibrant red and gold, drooped like wilted petals. The fabric was patched with whatever could be scavenged. Sailcloth, curtains, and old clothes. Smoke curled from a crooked chimney fashioned from stacked buckets. A wheelbarrow filled with shattered masks and marionettes lay tipped on its side, strings tangled like a spiderweb. Circus remnants were everywhere. Faded juggling pins, broken stilts leaning against crates, rusted hoops and cracked tambourines. But there was no laughter here, just the sound of wind threading through the leaves and the distant creak of rope swaying from an old trapeze rigged with 2 gnarled trees. M spun in a gleeful circle.
Come one, come all, don't hesitate. They don't bite, or at least not of late.
Mika stifled a laugh, the absurdity of it, while Kat stepped cautiously, scanning every face.
They're all performers,
Mika whispered, watching a girl no older than her twist balloons into strange, abstract shapes without even looking up.
Former performers.
Kat muttered under his breath.
This is surreal.
A heavy-set woman, with smeared face paint and a missing shoe approached, dragging a battered cart of what looked like shrunken cotton candy machines and twisted coils of wire. She stopped in front of Kat and Mika, looked them over, then nodded slowly.
You two look like you've seen them.
She grunted. Mika could hardly understand her through a thick accent. Kat tensed.
The Queen's Guards? Yes, they almost caught us.
A few of the nearby refugees flinched at the mentioning of the Queen's Guards. The woman clicked her tongue.
You are lucky then. Most are not.
Kat swallowed hard.
I've heard stories. Rumours, really, about Frowners.
He didn't realize how quiet he'd become until he felt Mika glance at him.
I always thought it was exaggerated.
He continued.
Some kind of superstition to keep people in line, but this place...
Is no tale,
exclaimed the woman.
is policy.
She pointed towards a cracked sign staked into the dirt at the edge of the clearing. The paint had mostly peeled off, but the last two words were still legible. Smiles mandatory. The woman sat down on a worn crate, elbows on her knees.
They always watch. If you seen frowning, crying, gasping, or even wincing, you are marked. Jester come, and you vanish.
And what happened after that?
Mika asked curiously. Another voice chimed in. An older man, nearby, hunched beneath a pile of circus blankets. He crawled out of them like a roach. When he stood up, it revealed a tall man with sunken eyes, his once bright coat dulled with grime.
The sorry. The strong. Go to the mines. On the rest.
He didn't finish. He just gestured towards a rusted cart with a wheel that kept spinning on its own.
I saw it,
Said another woman softly.
a man taking join the parade, just plucked out the crowd. A week later, I see something with his eyes, grinning at children from the front of a Ferris wheel. It laughed, but it wasn't him. At least, not anymore.
Mika covered her mouth, horrified by what she had been told.
They reshape people.
Katz added, almost in a daze.
They use plutonium to twist their bodies into attractions.
No escape.
The tall man nodded.
No mercy. Che will disappear.
M, who had been twirling silently on one foot nearby, finally broke the tension with a chirpy voice and an exaggerated bow.
Don't frown too deep or sigh for too long, or you'll end up in a circus song. A ride, a clown, a beast on display. So let's be quick and not delay.
Katz nodded solemnly.
We can't stay here. If they find the crash site, they'll follow us, and find you all as well.
Mika's jaw was set now. She remembered the half-buried wagon she'd seen when she first crashed into the world.
Yes,
She whispered.
we should go.
The Circus Kingdom refugees. The forest was quiet, not the kind of peaceful quiet that followed the songs of birds or the gentle wind, but a smothering silence, as if the trees themselves were holding their breath. Mika sat with her knees tucked to her chest, watching the embers of the campfire flicker low. Katz sat nearby, nervously thumbing the edges of his Latonian book, glancing at the sky as if afraid it might fall again. The refugees whispered softly in their own corners. Then M froze mid-cartwheel, their head tilted, mask slowly rotating toward the trees.
When shadows sway and silence creeps,
M sang softly, spinning on one foot like a music box ballerina.
the porcelain ghost no longer sleeps.
Katz nearly dropped his book.
That's not reassuring.
M tiptoed to the edge of the clearing, peeking through the brush.
She's Nero, yes, she's here.
They whispered, voice hushed but still dancing on the edge of a rhyme.
A sneaky strut, no laugh, no cheer.
Further in the forest, Vivian stood at the edge of the trees, her porcelain mask catching the faintest moonlight. Smooth, white, eternally unreadable. Her flamboyant garb, once full of colour, was now cloaked in shadow, dulled, subdued. She moved with an unsettling grace, silent and sharp. No parade, no dance, just the crunch of soft earth beneath her boots and the silent creak of the long, spindly limbs of the clown beast following behind her at a distance, its stilts clicking like clockwork. She crouched at the base of a mossy stump, running a gloved finger along a smear of soot, remnants of Kat's brief invisibility spell. Nearby, a snapped twig, a torn bit of fabric, glitter and confetti, perhaps from M. Her fingers twitched. She was close. Vivian rose without a word, eyes sweeping the darkness like twin searchlights. The clown behind her tilted its head unnervingly slow. Back at the camp, a strange breeze passed through the clearing. It bent the circus tents and rippled through the trees, like a warning whispered by the wind itself. M froze mid-juggle, one boot suspended mid-air, like they'd just forgotten how to dance. Their mask flickered and changed to show wide, painted eyes, a mouth forming a hollow O of silent alarm. When no one was watching, the mask changed again, to narrowed eyes and gritted teeth.
When shadows sway and silence creeps, the porcelain ghost no longer sleeps. I smell her perfume in the air. Vivian's near. Beware, beware.
Kat stiffened. Mika stepped beside him. The refugees stopped what they were doing. No one laughed, not even Mika. No one clapped either. The air thickened with shared unease and tension. But they didn't run, not this time. Instead, under the high of nightfall, Kat, Mika, M, and the ragtag circus performers huddled beneath the largest of the tents, a great faded red and weather-stained white proudly standing in the center of the clearing. Inside, the light from a lantern danced on their faces. The former ringmaster, tall and wary, with a cracked top hat, perched at a defiant angle. With folded arms he looked to the group. His voice carried the weight of performance and purpose. "We draw her in," he said, eyes catching the flicker of the lantern light, "just like she's drawn so many in before." No one needed to ask who she was. They all knew it was Vivian, the porcelain ghost, the Queen's dog of war. They moved swiftly and silently. The performers, no strangers to spectacle, set to work as if building a stage for the final act of a grand production. Curtains were hung between the trees, lanterns strung across branches, their soft glow stretching out like bated breath. A clearing that had been nothing more than mud and root now shimmered with the illusion of a travelling carnival come to life. Smoke and mirrors were conjured with sleight of hand and scraps of old magic. The tent seemed to breathe and shift. Somewhere deep in the trees, a mechanical instrument, patched together from rusted pipes and shattered dreams, wheezed out a lullaby. Slow, sorrowful, and haunted. It was all an illusion, yet it felt real. M disappeared behind a curtain. When they stepped out once again, they had replaced the mismatched jester's garment. In its place, a chilling mimicry of the Queen's Guard uniform. Their porcelain mask now bore the familiar, smiling void of Vivian's own. At a glance in just the right shadow, M was her, a twisted twin born of theatre and vengeance. They skipped through the clearing with eerie grace, careful to stay just at the edge of visibility. A flash here, a silhouette there, enough to make Vivian question if she was being watched or followed.
"I'll be her mirror, false but true,"
M whispered, their painted grin gleaming in the dark.
"Let's see what she decides to do."
At the heart of the false carnival, Katz knelt upon the forest floor, the pages of his Latonian book fluttering under flickering candlelight. Around him, a small circle of melted wax and chalky sigils. He muttered an incantation with tight, shaky breath. From a brass censer, smoke began to billow. Not the natural kind, but smoke with weight, with abstract shapes. It slithered into the trees like something alive, wrapping itself around trunks and tents alike. It dulled sound and warped vision. Every footstep echoed backwards. Every whisper echoed thrice.
"This spellbook is meant to make people confused. It's a part of the pranks chapter in this book,"
Kat stated, looking up at Mika and M with soot-streaked cheeks.
"It won't hurt her, but it might make her think she's lost her way. We only need a few seconds."
Above them, on a narrow wooden platform which was placed between two trees by the old acrobats, Mika stood with wind rushing past her face. Her scarf fluttered like the wing of a silent bird. She didn't speak, she just closed her eyes, and the forest held its breath again. For a moment there was only darkness. Then the sky cracked, not with lightning or thunder, but with the pulse of pure, cold light. Starlight. It spread across the canopy like spilled silver, draping over the smoke and mirrors, over lanterns and tents, catching in the curls of steam. The clearing transformed. Less a trap, and now more a vision, a dream. A place between worlds. From the shadows beyond, the porcelain mask of Vivian tilted up. She saw it. She stepped forward. Into the illusion. Into their hands. Into the final act. Vivian stepped through the veil of smoke, her spear already in her hands, glinting with a hungry silver edge. Her mask, untouched by time or mercy, gleamed under the false carnival's light. She moved without sound, each step poised, controlled, and deadly. She swept past the flickering tents, head tilted. Her eyes scanned over every corner and every shadow. The instrument playing in the forest wheezed behind her like a mechanical breath. Her grip on the spear tightened. Then she saw movement, a flicker of a figure just beyond the smoke. Tall, familiar. Vivian surged forward, but when she lunged through the illusion of M's masked double, her blade only sliced air. The figure crumbled into dust and laughter. The smoke thickened and a flash of light occurred. She turned again, but the forest around her was no longer real. Her vision doubled. Mirrors spun into place, face twisting in and out of view. It was a circus from her nightmare. Her circus turned against her. A cage dropped, not a physical one, no iron bars or chains. But the floor beneath her shifted. With a pulse from Mika above, vines wrapped the earth like veins, blooming upward like serpents and golden wire and hardened root. They locked around her feet like a snare. Cat stood just beyond the smoke, his hand still glowing from the incantation. He had never casted anything stronger, never dared. Vivian turned, but behind her, M stepped into the light. However, they were no longer masked as her twin. M, arms spread wide, spinning on one foot, began to sing.
No more parades and no more shows. No more silence where terror grows. It's your turn now to stand and see what life is like when forced to flee.
Vivian didn't speak, her eyes behind the mask flicked between them. Calculating, cold, but it didn't matter anymore. They had won. Later, a bonfire crackled in the center of the encampment. Sparks leapt skyward like tiny dreams being set free. The tent stood taller now, no longer weighted down by fear, but lit with quiet celebration and laughter. Real laughter, which echoed between the trees for the first time in years. Cat sat cross-legged near the fire. M, upside down in a handstand behind him, humming some nonsense tune about soup and stars. Mika stood at the edge of the clearing, eyes turned upwards. The stars above blinked gently, as if they recognized her gaze. She smiled. For so long, the light inside her had flickered, weak, fading. But now, it glowed again. A soft, silver pulse beneath her skin, like a heartbeat tied into the heavens.
I think I'm regaining some strength,
she said quietly. Katz, who had walked up to check on her, replied,
That's good. That's really good. You belong up there, don't you?
He asked. Mika nodded.
But until then,
she stated,
I don't mind staying here for a bit longer.
Kat smiled. Not the nervous twitch of anxiety, but a real one. An honest smile. The kind he hadn't felt in years. Beside them, M twirled upright and leapt onto a stump like a ringmaster taking the final bow. With arms flung to the sky and a voice full of joy, they declared,
From stardust to dreams, to forest fights, we've turned the dark to dazzling lights.
The fire roared in response, and in the heart of the forest, where fear once ruled, joy finally took root.